Sounds good. Thank you so much, Maybelline. Such a pleasure to be here with you all today. Excited to teach this class on public speaking and pitching. A little bit about my background for those of you who I haven't met before. I am an entrepreneur and startup advisor. I work primarily with plant-based CPG brands, sustainable companies, nonprofits. And also I have a background in marketing communications. My first company I ever started was a marketing communications agency. And I've had the opportunity to co-found and assist in the founding of many companies. And yeah, I'm very passionate about plant-based foods. So here for any questions that you have before we start, and I'm going to pull up the presentation. Hold on 1 second.
Jennifer, let me know. Let me know when you want me to share the worksheet with them.
Yeah, you can go ahead and share that now. And we'll just go through that at the end. That way everybody has it. That'll be great. Sorry, I'm just getting the share screwed up. Great. All right, everybody. So public speaking and the art of pitching. It's such a fun topic and one that as founders, you're going to need to learn and understand very deeply if you're going to raise capital. And I'm sure many of you are going to go that direction. So let's start with the basics. In the last class that we covered, or the last class that I offered to the cohort, we talked a little bit about brand storytelling. And so we're going to go into that first. And our flow today, we're going to talk about what you need to know about your brand, how you need to structure your deck, how you need to understand your audience, and then how you can practice. So with branding, it's really important to understand yourself and your brand and to have an understanding exactly with relation to your competitors, of where you are in the life cycle of your company, what your needs are, who your audience is, etc. And that is really the first key. So essential branding is the most important thing to develop. So if you haven't developed that yet and you're wanting to go pitch anybody, I recommend that you take some time and just to work through the and understand the aspects of your business that you're going to have to articulate and explain to other people, be they investors or, let's say you're setting up for a retail pitch to Whole Foods. You have to have your brand essentials really dialed in. And so mission, vision, values, voice, and visuals. These are absolutely key to really have an understanding of before you go talk to somebody else. Because one of the things that I really want you to take away from class today is if you don't know your brand or product, how are you going to talk about it to somebody else and expect somebody else to get in it? How are they going to get it if you don't get it? If you can't make it clear, concise, and fast for them to understand. And then if they don't understand it, if we're pitching for the purpose of raising funds, how are they going to invest in it and why, if they can't understand what it is for? And so storytelling and pitching is, again, one of the most important parts. Your founder story and your brand story go hand in hand. You need to understand how to tell your story as a founder. You need to understand how to tell your brand story. And those two things are independent. Some brands, of course, have founder stories that are not nearly as important to the brand, but also many founders downplay their role in the brand, especially women. This is something, again, I mentioned in the brand storytelling workshop. It's a common theme to see people really just downplay themselves. And there's a difference between bragging and, telling your story. And there's also a difference between, not telling your story and being humble. You got to find that fine line to walk where you're telling your founder story, you're playing up, the attributes and the things you bring to the brand, as well as weaving it into the brand story and strengthening the brand story through your presence as a person. Because one of the things that's most important to remember is as an early stage company, especially, which many of you are, if you're in this accelerator, then people are going to buy into the story of your brand because you don't have a huge amount of traction. You know, you are what they're buying into. And so again, that story needs to be really strong. It needs to be beautiful, and it needs to feel well integrated. And so any questions about storytelling before we go into the deck? All right. Okay, so essential deck slides. We're going to take some time here and we're going to walk through this. Oh, yes, Jody, you have a question. What can I answer for you?
Sorry, I couldn't find my little raise my hand. For the founder story, brand story, is it supposed to be really short and concise, like 3 sentences? Or, you know, because I hear conflicting ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's not really a right and wrong answer. Whatever you do, it needs to just make the rest of your story flow. Like the rest of these like different slides here, you know, with the mission and vision statement, you know, like for example, we talked last time about Lovelocks. For those of you who weren't there last time, Lovelocks is a vegan carrot locks brand that was created by the founder, Nicole Dursaway, because she had a high-end celebrity client who was pregnant and was sad that she couldn't, you know, participate in their bagel and lox Sundays. You know, it was just something that was sweet. And then as Nicole like created this product, she realized how many health benefits it had. She realized the omega-3 profile was similar to real salmon. And, you know, it is a non-toxic, mercury-free alternative to traditional salmon lox, right? Bam, that's my founder story that ties into there specifically. And then, you know, if people want to ask more about why did, you know, Nicole, like, why is Nicole qualified to do this? You know, then you can go into something different. But like, it's good depending on how long the pitch is to have something that's like clipped and concise. But like, if you have a really cool story about like, you know, there's, for example, another company I worked with called, what is it? What is the name of it? Anyways, it's a vegan cheese company in India. And so soft spot foods, sorry, my brain needs more caffeine today. So they basically have a founder story where their founder, you know, had significant gut issues and like, and was really suffering from like chronic indigestion and just stomach problems. She was like struggling with nutrient absorption because her stomach was, you know, having so many problems. And she realized it was because of the dairy that she was eating. Dairy is in everything in India. And so it was really hard for her to find alternatives. And so she decided to make one. And, you know, her family is also in production and has like different types of warehouses for different like production projects all over India. And so she was able to turn one of those production sites into a food production site. So the reason, for example, in this story, we highlight that is because having a great production capability, doing this from a health-oriented perspective is, you know, really important. And then like for that, you know, this person, her name is Shreya, she was very passionate also about having like whole food, like sustainable sourcing. And so that's important to her because one of the things she realized was that, you know, the food was not sustainable that she was eating on top of that. And it was filled with like pollutants and chemicals. And so, you know, she went in to find upcycled like seeds and things of that nature, like upcycled nuts to make this product, and all the sourcing can be traced. So that's the founder story, how it weaves in that case, right? And so hers is a little bit longer and more involved. And, you know, there's different ways that you can play it in. But whatever you're going to do with that, just make it like smooth and seamless in the mission and vision statement along with the brand. If you have, in general, like when you're pitching your brand, you're going to have a slightly shorter amount of time than you would ideally want. Like, let's say you have 10 minutes. It would be easier to pitch your brand in 20, right? To really be able to give people like a full view of what you do. But yeah, just imagine that you're gonna have 10 minutes. Like, what would you need to tell somebody? Imagine you're gonna have 5 minutes. Like, write something longer and then pick your bullet points out of it, like what you would need in these, like the context of different length of time. Because, you know, for example, if you meet a VC in an elevator, you're not gonna have 5 to 10 minutes to tell them your story. You're gonna have 2 minutes and you're gonna have to figure it out, you know, like it's what is important in the time and context that you have and with regards to who you're talking to. And so we'll go back a little bit more into that later in the deck as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes,
Cool.
thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so essential slides. So here's just a breakdown, and you'll definitely want to take a picture of this because this is a good list, you know. just to keep in mind. This is a good length for a deck. You want to have a deck that's around like 10 to 15 slides max. You know, you can have a longer deck, but at the same point, you're going to make people lose attention span. Like, you know, people are going to lose attention after reading through like more than like essentially 10 slides. So you want to try to keep things as concise as possible. And you really want to just begin in a very measured way. This is just a very traditional like style and flow for a deck layout. You want to begin with like a title slide and a slogan, you know, like for example, Love Locks, Eat Me, Save the Sea, and Love Locks with the little logos, right? And then the mission and vision statement. And so again, that's where you weave in your founder story, your brand story into what you are wanting to do and what you're envisioning, right? So we talked about mission and vision before. And so mission is what you do. Vision is what you're imagining, what you're aspiring to. And so those are how you differentiate those two. And so you want to have that plus a little bit of your founder story sprinkled in here. Again, if you have something more important, you can have a separate slide for your founder story, but just keep in mind, you don't want to have too much information because people will lose attention. And so after you get those basic parts in the first 2 slides, you want to go into the problem. So what problem are you solving with your product? And ideally for who? Just very, very like limited detail required, but like what problem are you solving and for who? And then on the next slide, just make it as succinct as possible, connecting to the points with the problem. Let's say, make like 3 to 4 points max about what you're solving. You can do more again if there's something really impressive, like really like pressing that you feel like people need to know, but 3 to 4 problems that you're solving is good, you know? Like for example, let's look at a brand like Spanx, okay? Spanx is super successful. It's like the period panties. What are you solving? You're solving the problem of like the tremendous amount of waste caused by feminine hygiene products. You're solving, you know, the problem that like some people don't like to use those or have allergies. You know, you're solving a problem of inconvenience for women for constantly having to buy these things. Like this is a recyclable alternative, a washable alternative, right? So that's something you could put there. And then so, you know, like I guess it would, to be more clear, the problem is speaking to like, if we were speaking to Spanx, period products cause waste. And then the solution would be a direct response to that. Like each line item in the problem, try to tie it to a line item in the solution. So feminine hygiene products cause waste. So we have a recyclable, washable product to replace it. You know, that would be the solution, right? And so once you go into the problem and solution, you know, like for example, if we talked again about Love Locks, this product replaces vegan or replaces traditional carrot locks with a mercury-free alternative that's safe for pregnant women. The problem is pregnant women can't eat traditional salmon locks, right? And so that's how you would tie together the problem and solution. And so then you ideally go into, after you've like told them what you're solving, the product information. And so you want to keep it as short and succinct as possible, but play up the benefits, play up, you know, what people are getting out of your product, like what is important, and just talk about like the different attributes or the different product SKUs that you have so they can be introduced to the product fully. Now that they see where the product is ideally going to go and what it's doing, they have that more complete overview, including a look at the packaging and just any like high definition product photos. And so after you introduce the products, then you want to go into the competitive set. And again, you know, some people will switch these around. Sometimes people will do market data first. Some people will do, you know, the competitive set first. And you can play around with the order of some of these. The first 4 or the first 5 rather are kind of the ones that I recommend you keep in that order. And the rest of them you can kind of play around as you feel it flows for the deck, right? So comp set, we'll go through that. The competitive set, you want to have your product essentially placed next to like its top 3 competitors and say, why your product? You know, like if we were talking about Love Locks versus, let's say, they have Save the Sea vegan carrot locks. This product is made with liquid smoke. and does not have a texture that is comparable with Lovelock's, whereas Lovelock's has a custom smoking process and curing process that mimics the taste and texture of salmon. And so there's one, you know, like just give kind of like a response to like why this one versus this one for all of those three, and then talk about it. You know, let's say Current Foods has a vegan salmon. It has 0 nutritional value because it's made out of konjac, you know, like just all of those things. You kind of talk about like what the disadvantages are in the main competition versus your product. And really important to try not to make it too negative. They don't want to see people, you know, you don't want to see people like bashing products if you're an investor looking at it. You know, we want to see people who are confident in why their product is good. But again, just making sure the tone of it is not like inherently negative, like, yeah, these guys suck, don't buy them. You know, none of that is what we want to see on a pitch deck. So just keep that in mind. Okay, next, market audience data. And so for this, sorry about that. For this, make sure I'm on do not disturb really quickly. Focus mode. Okay, cool. So market audience data, basically you want to know who the audience is that you're making this for. For example, let's talk about the audience for Lovelock's. For Lovelock's, you know, the audience is women 35 to 50, and like that's the primary audience demographic. Of course, men are, you know, interested in this product as well, but just keeping in mind that women control about 80 to 90% of the purchasing power in households for food. That's who our demographic is. And it's women who are interested in healthy eating, healthy lifestyle, you know, yoga, and have like median income of like $80,000. So you want to have as much of like that information as you can, you know, because Lovelock's, for example, is a higher end product. Like this is made to be more of a luxury replacement for salmon. You know, it has very nice packaging. It has very nice ingredients, whole food, organic, kosher certified, gluten-free, all of those things. It has all of those different certifications, and really is prioritizing being like a top tier product, but still, you know, approachable in the fact that it is simple ingredients. And so that's why it's important. They want to see that you know who you're targeting, and they also want to see, if they're looking at your product, you know, that your audience and your market information are complete, and that your product that you're marketing fits, you know, the audience that you're targeting. For example, if you have like a very masculine, minimal looking product, like just white and black labels, very like, you know, kind of edgy, typeface, then, you know, are you really targeting women with your branding? And if you have people who are like savvy with products, like product-based businesses, they are going to look at that, because that does matter. If you have a disconnect between your packaging and your target audience, that's not going to be a good fit. They're not going to be drawn to it, you know? So that's something you need to make sure that you have in alignment as well. And that's why I always recommend for people, you know, when you're doing your branding, you have to look at that really before you do this, at least to some degree. So, okay, moving on to market size and value. Now that you have ascertained who your market is and what people like directly you're targeting, you also want to look at the markets within that, right? So we've developed our audience data, like who our ideal buyer is. And then with that, you also need to decide, okay, so I'm targeting, in this instance, the seafood markets, like the kosher markets, the plant-based markets, the health food, you know, healthy like snack brand markets. And so that's your audience. And so once you decide who those audiences are that you're targeting, like what is the cross section of your business essentially? Like, for example, as Lovelock's is a vegan seafood product, so it's kosher, like that's what we're going to target: vegan seafood, kosher, like people who are interested in healthy living, healthy eating. You know, like we want that to be in the seafood aisle of a grocery store. We want it to be right next to the traditional locks. And ad data, like marketing data, proves that that's a really great way for plant-based products to sell like 30% more, right? So you need to understand that cross section. So kosher, health food, seafood, and then plant-based. Plant-based, of course, is the smallest market section out of all of those, but it's still good at it is a plant-based product to have that listed and to have the market value. And so you can go online and you can search market values for specific submarkets. It's actually something that's quite easy to do. So like, what is the estimated value of like the kosher market in like 2024, you know, or like for the next 5 years? And you'll also probably see a term called CAGR, CAGR. And so basically what that means is the like the cost of like, what's the market going to like grow? Like, what are you looking at for the market growth in the future? And so you can write that down as well and just talk about how the market itself is going to grow over the next few years if you have really compelling data there. If you don't have really compelling data for the markets that you're trying to target, then try to put what's needed, but, you know, play into it and talk about how you're refreshing the market rather than get overly like deep into the data. You know what I mean? Okay. Traction and milestones. So just like we've been talking about with the brand story as well, I want to see more founders who have clear lists of what they've done and how they've done it. You know, like I want to see that you have been featured in events for, you know, like IBM and, you know, like whatever different big companies because they've asked you to do that. I want to see, you know, like what are your wins? Like you want to put down like what are your wins? Like product went into production with X co-manufacturer here, you know, like that's a big thing going from a like test kitchen to a proper full commercial kitchen, right? And to like manufacturing. And so like secure distribution with like KeHE for, you know, like 5 different like outlets of, or like 5 different Erewhons around like the LA area, you know, like those are the things that people want to see on there. It can be small, it can be big, you know, like, but people want to see what you've done. And if you've self-funded, you know, like just let them know, like self-funding, we started XYZ and we've sold to XYZ. And this is something where you can also have, like, if you're an early stage company, you can just have some metrics about like how much in sales you've had for the last couple of years. If you're a later stage company and you have more data on this, you want to put together like a traction sheet for, you know, what your financials are, like, what are you looking at? What are your costs and how have you like gotten them down? You know, like what are any other details for things that, you know, you've worked on? And what do you have? Like if you have advertising data, like your customer acquisition costs, those are kind of different things that you want to put in there. But again, this is something that's very dependent on what stage you are in your company to really keep those informations kind of just that you need to put those informations front and center if you have them. And if you don't, that's okay too. But it's just something that, you know, you should put something there to show what you have already done. Even if it's just like, we've developed a product, you know, how can you talk about how you developed that product so that it sounds really great and sounds really appealing? Like, have you developed patented technology? Are you working towards a patent? All of those things need to go there, you know? And then once you're done with the traction and milestones, you want to also go into, you know, the traction and milestones again are like what you've already done, like things you've already completed and have hit or in the process of. And then the future plans are, you know, what is incomplete? And then, you know, what are you working towards in the future? Like, are you working to develop a new product line? You know, are you working to develop a new SKU? Are you working to, you know, slowly shift towards fully compostable packaging? You know, what are your long-term goals? Like, are you looking to donate to a charity in the future? I think somebody in this group mentioned that on the last one. You know, right now we're preparing to be able to offer, you know, at-risk youth jobs in our team, like whatever it is. Like, how are you planning for the future? How are you planning to contribute more? And make sure you have just a clear list of those things so you can see what you're aspiring to do. Again, tying back into your vision, like what is it that you're creating in the future that is aligned with your mission and vision in the now? Okay, and so the next part, the ask and the raise. A lot of people I notice confusingly don't actually put that on their deck. And this is one of the first things that I see with companies and I'm like, oh, okay, they're probably a little green, you know? if you're going to ask for money and you're going to be fundraising, you need to have a clear ask and you need to have a why for your ask. You know, like I'm raising $500,000. Here's a pie chart that says I'm raising $500,000 because, you know, $100,000 needs to go to production. You know, like $200,000 needs to go to distribution, and, you know, or whatever, like just ingredients costs, like just break it down, you know, and have something that you can show that's even just like on a basic level that can back that up. Because, you know, there's some investors who will be a little bit more forgiving with like not having the data around like what you're raising for, but most aren't. And so you need to have like a, what's called a CapEx budget kind of put together that you can also send them, which will break down, you know, what you're, if you're like just starting the business, everything you need to open the business from there, or if you're raising around because you're like going into like a bigger round of production, like what you need and why. You know, for example, like on the latest round for Lovelocks, what they're raising for is to fund their next round of production because they have the opportunity to go into Earth Fair Market as well as Erewhon. And so they just need that next push. They have all their production specifications ready to go, all the equipment ready to go, and they just need to get moving and actually produce the product and need some capital to back that up. You know, so what is it that you're producing for? You know, we're producing our next run because we want to get distribution through KeHE so that we can go into 5 different Erewhon stores around the Los Angeles area. And, you know, we can also go into Earth Fair markets on the East Coast, up to 15 stores. And so that's why you're raising. And so the breakdown of that is like distribution, warehousing, fulfillment, production, executive team and consulting time, whatever it is. You know, just think about all the things that you're going to need and just get as clear as you can and then put the raise. And I think it's important when you're doing a raise to always just estimate a little more than you think you're going to need. You know, like don't get too crazy, but be realistic with yourself that there's probably going to be something that pops up that you don't know. You know, when I see people like write down their raise and it's a very specific number and it's a very specific, like we've budgeted everything out. I'm like, that's great. You guys also are still in a startup and there's probably going to be some things that go wrong. So give yourself some grace, round up a little bit. Like it's okay. You know, that's important because it would be harder to go back later and say, hey, we need just a little bit more money to your investors versus saying, hey, we raised a little bit extra and now here's what we're going to put this towards. You know, it puts you in a disadvantageous position to be able to do that. Okay. Next, after those pages, you have the team pages. Make sure you're highlighting again, just a quick bio about you, a quick bio about any of your key team members and any of their key work experiences. And then make sure you have a contact page. I have received decks that do not have contact pages, and it is always confusing. It is like, do you want to have a response to this, or would you like to be in touch about this, or what was the goal of this whole thing if you can't get in touch with the right person afterward, you know? So that's a super important thing to keep in mind. And so I know this was a lot of information. Any questions here with the deck structure?
I do. I don't know how to raise my hand. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. Go for it.
Okay, great. I'm gonna. So, back to what were you talking about? Darn. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to find what you were talking about. The market, the traction, I think. Yeah, the traction. Talk like some of the big wins, and which I have had. However, I've been in my business for 14 years. I've been like a snail, and I'm wondering if that looks bad. Like if people look down upon that because it's like, sure, I have traction and I'm in a better spot than I was when I first started, but I've really been moving slow. So is that something I should like maybe mask?
No, I think that you need to be radically honest about what's happening, but also make it sound good, you know, like put a little garnish on it, right? Make it sound fancy. I feel like there's nothing wrong with having taken your time and built slowly, because that means that you have been very measured in the choices that you're making and you haven't raised money to date because you've been smart and self-funded, right? That's great. You know, like like play it up and say it like that, like be proud of that, you know, like I've been in businesses for like, I've had businesses myself for like 8+ years as a consultant. And like, it's hard to run a business at all. Like most businesses fail within the first 4 years. So the fact that we've done that is awesome. It's like, we have a great tenured history of business, 14 years to this date. We've been self-funded and just taking our time, building mindfully. And now we're ready to blast off. That's how I would throw that, you know? It's all about the marketing verbiage, you know, people will buy into how you market yourself and how you buy into your own story, back to that whole thing, you know, like make it sound good. It is great. It is great. It's not an easy thing to have a business for 14 years. And we don't all need to have, you know, we don't all need to become like Amazon, right? Like we're not trying to become the world's biggest company. So yeah.
Well, so my second question is, are there companies or consultants that you would recommend that, because now I am ready to like blast off, like you say, and I'm also launching a new product that I feel like now I feel more confident about entering the CPG space. But I feel like I need help because that's a whole other animal that I don't know too much about, other than you know how risky and expensive it is. And so I would love to work with someone that could help me hone in my branding, first of all, and my story and all of it, because I have all of that. I have the background with my family and like but how to tie it all together and make it look good is what I need help with. So.
Yeah. Well, I would love to take a call with you and schedule just some extra time outside of this to talk through that more fully. I can go through kind of the information on the brand storytelling workshop that we did last time. So you can have some thoughts. Yeah. So you can have some information from there to see what we talked about there, because I think that's super relevant to what you're talking about. And then I would be happy to work with you on that, or recommend somebody who would be more suited towards working on that based on whatever your particular product idea is. I have a really great network of advisors that I work with through a couple of different companies. So yeah.
Amazing. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Anybody else before we move on? Great. Okay.
Jennifer, sorry, there is a question from Jody on the chat. So she's asking, CAGR, well, was that a word?
Yeah, that's the word. I can't remember what exactly, I always forget what exactly that means, but it means like basically like the amount of yearly revenue, or maybe it's, am I thinking of a different word? Hold on one second.
I just want to know if I spelled it right.
Yeah, got on 1 second. I'll get you the full spelled out, like written version of that towards the end of the meeting. I always mess that word up because
I got cost and where the market growth comes from, but I wasn't sure I got the CAGR correct.
Yeah, it's basically a word that means like what the market growth is anticipated, like what's the yearly like growth anticipated from that market, or growth anticipated over a certain amount of time. I'll find a little description of that so I can send that to you.
Yeah, I tried Googling it and I'm like, oh, I thought I had it wrong.
I'll find it for you. I'll send you like a little
compound annual growth rate.
Yes, that's what it is. I always mess that up. So compound annual growth rate per market. So that's something that, like, again, you're looking at that from the perspective, like back what we were talking about here, you're looking at that from the perspective of, you know, again, how big is that market in terms of like the US dollars? How much is it going to grow year over year? Like if I'm saying, hey, you should invest in this company, I'm saying, hey, you should invest in this company because this company is expected to, like, this particular market, like let's say we're talking about something else, like non-alcoholic beverages right now are really like on an uptick, right? Like people are sober-ish, like the trend is sober-ish right now. People are more interested in having like healthy adaptogen beverages than they are in like, you know, drinking a bottle of wine. Like wine sales are down 30%. So you can say like the market trend, like the CAGR for this particular industry is, you know, they're expecting a 50% growth rate over the next like 3 years and blah, blah, blah. Like whatever the numbers are, you can usually find some kind of market data related to that. And then you can continue to just kind of build your case. Like, think of it like that. Like, you're building a case for why people should make an investment in your company, because like this investment for them, most likely, depending on the terms that you create or give to them, is not going to come back for like 5 to 10 years, right? So 5 years is very optimistic, but like 5 to 10 years is more expected. So they want to see in your data why they should make an investment. Like, you're building a case for why this is a compelling investment for them, even outside of, you know, your story, right? These are two things that are not actually dependent on you having a product in market. So the data for your marketplace, is it growing right now for where you're targeting? If it's growing, awesome. Put as much data as you can, because you're making yourself look good by saying, this is why we're doing this, right? And so I think that answers that question. Any other questions about that?
Nope, perfect. Thank you.
My pleasure. Okay, so basic pitch deck Q&A. This is kind of just going into the things that like you need to think through and put these in all those different slides that you are going to put together. Like, these are the biggest questions that you need to answer for investors and for people who you are talking about your product to. Why are you doing this? This first one should be, who are you? Why are you doing this? What problem are you solving? What's your solution to the problem? Who are you solving the problem for? How is your product different? How big is your target market? What traction have you made so far? What are your projections for your future? And what is your ask? So those are just things to think about. And so things that are really important for you to also know: you really need to know your audience info. You really need to know your target markets. You need to know your market value, your comp set, and your financials. And I'm highlighting these again and giving these another slide because I don't want you to just be able to look at your pitch deck and know this. You know, I want you to have like some basic info about each of these memorized. So when you're in an elevator and you're talking to an investor, you can just throw down some amazing knowledge on them and they get inspired. And people don't get inspired when you are not sure of who your audience is, or, you know, what market you're really targeting, and like who your products are. Like, I want to see people, like, if I'm sending somebody to the venture capital fund that I work with, I want to see them know, oh yeah, so we've looked at this other like vegan chicken brand, and here's what they're doing that's great. Here's why what we're doing is better. Here's our advantage. Like, I want to hear that. Or I don't think that people have done their research, you know? And like, that is something that you should know when you start your brand. Who else am I going against? You know, take some time. If I see people don't have like information about who their competitive set is, I think that they're not using Google. And so that for me goes, are they going to work very hard in other parts of their business? You know, are they going to put the time into this and understanding what's happening in their industry? You know, that's where my brain goes when I'm like looking at companies. And so you always want to do that. Pick 3 companies, like pick the top 3 companies who are in your competitive space. And then look at some other ones that are similar but different. The top 3 are the most important. You need to know who your direct competitors are. And if you truly don't believe you have direct competitors, then you should have relative products that you can make a comparison to. Like, you know, let's say there's not a vegan, like another vegan carrot lox product that you wanted to. Well, then you wanted to compare to. Maybe you should compare it to a vegan tuna, you know, something else in a similar like vegan seafood setting. So yes, Jody, what's your question?
Exactly that. That's, I've been working on that competitor situation. And how do you navigate when someone's really not doing like, so basically I would look at unique like food gifts, and I'd look at, you know, and then I would look at just, or plain, you know, confectionery, like it would have to be split up into different kinds of avenues, and maybe like astrology, wellness, tarot, that kind of thing. So it would have to be split up into 3 things in my case.
Yeah, I think like when I think about your product and what I know about your product, I would say it would be like artisan, like snacks, and then it would be cookies, and then it would be like the health and wellness aspect. You would kind of want to like position it between like just a couple products there and just say, here's a couple products that are doing like one thing that we're doing. but this is why you choose, you know, good vibes, right? And it's like, that's how you can do your comp set, right? Like, here's things that are like not quite doing what we're doing, but similar, like delicious cookies, but they're ugly, you know, like not exact wording, but whatever you want to say, like really beautiful product, or really artisan product, but like not targeting the health and wellness space, like whatever it is, like not targeting this type of market. Like here's how you draw the cross section where good vibes is in the middle, with having like a couple different like products, since there is nothing like what you're doing, right? That's how I would recommend to do that. So yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. And so again, just the financials, it really, like the financials are important. It's important for you to show investors, to show anybody who you're talking to your brand about, that you know what you're talking about. Like if you don't know what your advertising data is, like if you're running paid ads and you don't know how much you're spending on ad data, that's scary. I'm like, you know, what are you doing with your money? You don't know where your money's going? You know, it's important to know, like, what is the cost of your product? Like, how much are you selling your product at for retail? How much is it wholesale? How much is it, you know, like to make your product? Like, what are the costs of your ingredients? How do you plan on changing that? If you don't have that information, that data, really get thinking about it. It's okay as a very early stage company not to have that, because you're still like in production, figuring out production specifics, but you need to know that, and you need to say that, and you need to say those things are in your mind, you know, like, for example, the cost of customer acquisition, your CAC. Like if somebody says that to you, you know, and you're running paid ads, you need to know that. Otherwise, it's kind of like, well, what are they spending their money on? There's just certain things that like at different stages of the company you need to have. For example, if you already have your product in production, you need to have an idea of what exactly your costs are to make the product, what your sales price is, like your retail, like your wholesale, and then, you know, how you're going to get the cost down over time with volume and what that looks like, how you're going to sell more over time, like what that looks like, or what is your marketing spend because you're doing that. All of those things make complete financial pictures for what's going on in the company. Like, how is production getting less expensive? How is operational cost rising as your product scales? Like all of those things, like as you scale your company, need to be like building in your brain, so you can, again, build that case for investors that you know what you're doing, you know? That is very important. Okay. And so when you're doing a pitch deck too, it's really important to have a couple of different versions of the deck. You want to have one with short bullet points for live pitches or for in-person pitches where you're talking, because if you're up in front of a crowd of people and you have like paragraphs of text, you're going to not know what to say, and you're going to be squinting at the screen. It's not going to be cute. It's not going to be helpful. You want to have a deck that has bullet points for pitching live. And those bullet points, you want to know how to elaborate around them. You want to know what data fills in the gaps, and be personable and present with people, looking them in the face as you're doing that. And another deck you want to have is one that has slightly more info. So you're not there, like if you're not there to tell them the information that's maybe less obvious to somebody who's an outsider, then, you know, you can fill in the gaps with that, and still try to keep it short and sweet as possible, but make sure that people understand what's happening. That's important. Okay. And so one thing to know about both your deck and your pitch is it's going to evolve over time. And so don't get stuck. Don't be a dinosaur. Like, don't be afraid. Like you have to hold on to whatever initial version you put together of your deck because you're so proud of it, or whatever initial version of your like pitch that you put together. You know, be active in asking for feedback. Don't take feedback personally. Just be very, very clear that feedback is for you. Feedback is for your learning, for your growth, for your benefit. Even if sometimes it's not delivered nicely. Like, I remember one of the second times I ever pitched my like very first startup that I was working on. I went to New York, and, you know, I'm from California. People are nicer in California. And in New York, people are much more oriented towards like really like intense financial questions, as well as just like being much more abrupt. And it was like a little jarring for me. And I really struggled not to take it personally. And I talked to the CEO, who was really like teaching me how to do this for the first time. And he was like, yeah, you just can't take it personally. He's like, you also don't have to take everything that everybody says seriously. Take note of all the questions that people ask, like write yourself notes, and really like see what's relevant for you to internalize. What questions come up over and over again? And based on those questions, what can you audit about your deck? What can you audit about how you present? What resonates with people, you know? And that's something that's really like important to kind of keep as like an evergreen, like ever living, like flexibility, you know? And again, it's not that you have to adjust your deck to pitch like, or pitch to meet every single person's feedback, because sometimes people just love giving feedback for the sake of giving feedback, and it's actually not that helpful. There's some people who just love like talking and don't also know about your industry and are trying to give you feedback on a product that's like, you're on like something that they know that has no relevance to your industry. Like, for example, I used to work in the wine industry, and I can't tell you how many times I had old like white men mansplain things to me about how the wine industry works. And I'm like, actually, no, that's not how the 3-tier system works. And this is why we're doing it this way. I would love for it to be easier, but it's not. So let me explain to you why, you know, like have your facts clear for yourself. And if you know what you know, then don't let other people shake you just because they have like XYZ background or whatever it is. You are also an expert because this is your product. And so again, based on that, keeping in mind your own expertise, your deck and your pitch will sometimes have to shift slightly based on who you're pitching to. It's really important to know that. Of course, like if you're pitching to a sales, like retail, a buyer versus a VC, your pitch is going to be very different. If you're pitching to a VC versus an angel investor, your pitch is going to be different. It's not going to be tremendously different between an angel investor and a VC. But again, in general, angel investors are investors, in earlier stage companies, whereas VCs are invested in companies that have more traction and milestones. So they'll expect a lot more to be put together in terms of your financials versus an angel investor. Any questions about anything else audience related before we go into the practice portion? Cool. Okay. So the best thing that you can do in order to practice your pitch is to be prepared. Don't go into a pitch without practicing. Don't wait until last minute to update your deck and then send it to the event organizer. You know, I've been that person. It does not help to calm your nervous system. It does not help you show up with fullness and presence. And it really is helpful to practice your pitch and make sure you practice it also at the specific length you need it to be for an event, because many times the events will give you a criteria like, oh, you have 5 minutes to pitch. Oh, you have 2 minutes to pitch. Oh, you have 20 minutes to pitch. And then 20, like of that 20 minutes, you need 5 minutes for Q&A. So it's actually a 15-minute pitch. Those are all things that you want to take into account, and you want to practice really at the length of whatever pitch it is, you know? And so also, again, practicing for the audience that you're pitching to, you know, if you're practicing to VCs, or you're pitching for VCs, like how can you play up the financial aspect and make that really good? How can you make sure that you're extra comfortable with that? How can you just really have all of that memorized? How can you just be even more present by memorizing it so clearly you don't even have to look at your screen? Like that all builds confidence. They want to know that you know what you're talking about. They want to know that you know every part of your company if they're investing in you. So the more confident you are and the more prepared you are, the better that is. So again, get personal, get excited, make sure your body posture is great. We'll talk more about that in a second, but this is your story. So if you're not buying into it, other people are not going to buy into it. Talk about yourself, talk about your company with enthusiasm. And again, above all else, stay humble. So important. Another thing that's really important, I got this feedback from the first person that I worked with when I was fundraising for my first startup. Not that I did anything wrong, but like he made sure to emphasize for me how important it was to say that you don't know if you don't know. Like, don't make it up. Don't make stories. Don't make fantasies. If somebody asks you like, what is your cost of the production for XYZ, and you don't know, just say, you know, I'm not 100% sure right now. We just changed some things with our production specifications. Let me get back to you with that via email. It's a clear story rather than a lie, right? And so that's really important. Like, for example, if somebody asks you again, what's your cost of customer acquisition? what's your lifetime value of your customer? Like, I remember sitting there and like VCs were asking me stuff like this, and I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And that's okay. Like, we don't have to all be in like knowledgeable of every single thing as we're starting the company. But, you know, you need to get clear on if those questions are going to continue to come up, how can you answer them? Or how can you say, you know, I will get back to you on that soon. Let me check in on that. I'm not 100% sure right now. We just started, you know, we just increased our ad budget. Let me double check and talk to you about that later. Let me check in with my co-founder. It's really just an important thing that you just can't make stuff up. Even if you forgot in the moment because you're having nerves, no problem. Like, grab their email and send it later. Just say like, I'm actually having a brain freeze right now and I can't remember that. Let me just talk to you about that later and I'll send you over our deck. You know, the fastest ways to lose trust between yourself and investors is to really just make things up, because that's not what they want to see. You know, we have to be in full integrity with people who are potentially going to give us like thousands of dollars. And so a lot of times I notice when I see people come in for pitches, I'll notice people who are very anxious or like holding, you know, their hands or like moving their hands or doing this, like, and like just like twitching or whatever it is. It's totally fine. Like, we're all nervous, even still, like in general. Like, I'll go up in front of 500 people and talk about something. I'll still get a little nervous. I'm not super like nervous anymore, but I used to be, right? Like, I remember I used to teach yoga when I was younger. First time I taught a yoga class, I was so nervous. But like the feedback that I received that was really helpful for me was, if you can attack something with your posture, then you will change how you are being experienced in the room, not just for yourself, but for others. So, you know, are you slumping? Are you feeling like anxious? Like, I notice for myself, when I get like anxious about something, usually my shoulders come forward, right? Like, my shoulders will go forward like this, and I'll just kind of be sitting there like this. My chest is closed. I'm in a defensive position. So how can you realize, like, I'm not in a place of like confidence in myself and what I'm saying, or I'm feeling at the effect of something around me. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling scared. I'm feeling frustrated. How can I change how I am experiencing myself and how others will experience me by opening my chest, opening my body, standing up straight while I'm doing this? It's really scientifically proven to change your mind. You know, it's scientifically proven to create a shift in mindset. And, you know, if you have some time before your pitch and you're still feeling that, make sure you just take a minute for yourself, get grounded, you know, move your body. We're just animals who wear clothes. And think of how animals like to move and shake to release tension. You can do that before your pitches, because the more grounded and present you are, the more clear you are in what it is that you're doing, you know, the better it's going to be for you. And the more likely that even if you didn't have all the answers, somebody's going to want to help you. They see that you're really trying. They see that you're really putting in the time, and they feel confident that even if you don't know everything you need to know right now, they can help you to get there because you're willing to learn, you're attentive, you're trying, you're present with your brand and yourself. So that's it. Just on time, 1 o'clock. Okay. So next we're going to go into, well, first let's ask any more questions before we go into the homework. Anything that I talked about there in that last part that feels confusing? Nope. Okay, great. Okay, so homework. I would love to see all of you in class, the next one, which will be on Wednesday. And it would be really great for, in the time between now and then, if you all practice a couple of different rounds of pitching. I want you to practice in front of a mirror, a 2-minute pitch, a 5-minute pitch, and a 15-minute pitch. This is just with yourself. And make notes on what's different. Make notes on anything that comes up for you. Like, example, I found the 2-minute pitch really hard because I didn't know what I should include in that. I found the 15-minute pitch really hard because I struggle with talking about myself. Get really honest, you know, like, nobody's judging you for this. This is all for your own benefit and your own learning. So be clear with yourself about what's coming up. Like, I feel afraid to talk about myself in my 15-minute pitch. I don't know how to do that. So just like write it out, make any observations for yourself. And then once you have run through those pitches a couple of different times, to the point where you feel confident, I want you to have at least 2 different friends or family members listen to 2 different versions of the pitch and just give them this little checklist and ask them to give you feedback on all of it. How is your emotion, expression, storytelling, and posture? How is your content and organization of the content? Did they buy into it? Did they believe it, get it, trust it? What would they recommend you do differently? And what did they love? So that is your homework. And I want you to come prepared with these questions answered. And I would like you to be ready to do your 5-minute pitch to the class and receive feedback. Again, don't chicken out. Don't think that you're going to get it perfect, because you're not. So just already let yourself know that it's okay. We all do what we need to do, and it is all learning experience. I had a conversation with my mom about that the other day, but with regards to having kids, I was like, man, I'm really nervous to have kids someday. She's like, well, just stop being nervous because you're going to mess something up. I'm like, yes, thank you, Mom. You're right. And it's really okay. We are doing this because, you want to see how other people experience you, how other people experience your product, and what they need clarification on. Because sometimes when we're talking about something, we're so close to it, we don't see what's not obvious for other people. And this is your chance to get that feedback. So I really recommend you come. And then after your 5-minute pitch is done, depending on how many people we do have, we will just have another 5 minutes for feedback. And if there's less people, we'll take a little more time. And yeah, it's just a chance for you to ask any pressing questions about your brand, your pitch, anything you want to know about fundraising. And then we'll see how that goes. And I am complete. Any other questions from anybody about the homework or anything else that you would like to ask before we wrap up today?
Jody, you want to ask your question, Jody? Okay, so Judy has a question. Okay, go for it.
Am I unmuted? Yeah.
You are.
Okay.
Good. Okay. Basically, like for I'm gonna try really hard and do Wednesday. First of all, Maybelline, I don't have the link to Wednesday. I didn't even know it was on calendar. But Jennifer, so is the 5-minute pitch we're gonna be doing an elevator pitch, or would it be more like a VC pitch?
I would recommend, what's your goal right now? Are you wanting to fundraise soon?
No.
No? Okay, then give me your 5-minute elevator pitch for your brand. Like if you were pitching me to, let's say, somebody who you want to buy into one of your events, or somebody who, you want to like stock your product in a retail store, then give me that pitch. Whatever's most relevant for you, we can do one or the other. And just to speak to one other thing really quickly, the difference between obviously a retail pitch, for this one, I went more into the investment pitch because I feel like people struggle with that more. The difference between the investment pitch and the retail sales pitch, you're just going to need to make your product more forward than the financials. Obviously, they're not going to care as much about the market value of the product. If you're doing retail, they should already know that stuff and they know why they want to bring you in. But it's important to just have your data around like your pricing and things like that, like in your mind, if you're doing a retail pitch. So just keeping that in mind for you to include. Yeah.
I feel like people say, tell me about your product. Like we were speaking of earlier before we got on this, tell me about your product. And I always freeze. So, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Jody, yes, I'll send the recording with the link and everything and an email wrapping up everything.
Cool. Yeah, and I'll send you the link for the deck as well after we get done with this call, Maybelline.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, Jess said thank you so much for this super down to earth workshop.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to just do a quick round of popcorns for people and just ask them anything, like one thing they learned from the class today. I love finding a way to make sure that everybody engages because I think that that is important. So if we have a moment for that, that would be great.
Well, I can't think of one thing in particular, but definitely am motivated to start working on everything in the homework. It's just something I've been wanting to do for years and, talk to first of all, thank you so much. It was really helpful and super informative. Because I've been in the business for so long, it's stuff that I've heard before, but it's like, okay, now I feel motivated. So thank you for that.
Awesome, pleasure. Go ahead and popcorn it to somebody else. Okay. Francois, how about you? You can go next. You're on mute, dear.
That can help. Yes, thank you for the whole presentation. It was really, really informative and great. I really like it's just probably useful for me, but the posture and the how to act like an animal, it's really good, good advice for me that I should probably do more for my next public speaking opportunity. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in a conscious leadership group with the conscious leadership group consulting company. And essentially one of the things that they will make us do is get up and like move and like find a noise that expresses the emotion that's stuck. Like if we're afraid, make a noise that expresses your fear as loud as you can. Shake your body. Like what is, if this energy or emotion that was stuck in your body was like a movement, what would it look like? Like, what is it? Like, how can you get it out of your body? How can you ask it? How can you acknowledge it and then ask it to move forward so you can be more fully in presence? Because when we are overcome by our negative emotions, like our fear or our anger, a lot of times our body is doing things unconsciously, which make us look or feel or be experienced to other people or even to ourselves again unconsciously. We're just less able to be in full presence, to be fully engaging with people in the way that we want. And that's especially important for pitching or for selling your product, either to retailers or investors. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I'm glad that was helpful for you. Okay. Yvonne, how about you? Would you like to go?
I'm sure. For me, I think everything was informative. It was very, very good. Something to think about because I have done pitches before just off the fly. But I want to do more. And sometimes you do get nervous, and a 2-minute pitch compared to a 60-second pitch is totally different. You really have to expand on your brand and expand on yourself. And I know sometimes I'm like, okay, what do I say, to reach that 2-minute? And now you're asking for 5. I really have to go in and think outside the box. But a challenge is always good. For myself, I know that I have to rejoin my Toastmasters group, so I could get out there and do more public speaking, because that's where the money is at, to be honest, when it comes to small businesses. Why not bet on yourself? And I won, I believe, 3 pitches. It wasn't for a lot of money, but it's like, okay, I could do this. And I think that many of us doubt ourselves, but like you said, if you know your brand and you know your why and why you got out there and you're so passionate, people could hear it. And next thing you know, you're like thinking, oh, I'm not gonna win, and they call your name. So I think that's the best thing ever about doing these things, is once we get over that hump, executing is what we need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. I definitely think that, again, like the envisioning of your own success is half of your success. Like you can't go into something defeated, like, oh, I didn't win this. Like I went into my first ever pitch and I was like, did not really know what I was doing, but I had great presence. I was like, yeah, I practiced this. It's great. And like, I had really great feedback. And then they asked me like a bunch of questions afterward that gave me tremendous anxiety. And I learned what I needed to learn for next time, but it was like the success in my mind. I was like, yes, I nailed this. I got this. I took some CBD as well to just calm my nervous system a little bit, and had a matcha, it was a good balance. But yeah, it's like, how can you set yourself up for success to feel like you've already got this, you've already won this? It's really important, because in an ideal world, you can, you know, like you never know, even if it's not right at this time, you didn't get it this time. If you show up in full presence, you know, somebody who's a retailer or somebody who's like a VC is going to say, hey, this is really great, but you know, you're not at the stage where we invest in yet because we want you to have like XYZ amount of revenue, for example, for a VC, or, hey, you're not at a stage where we'd put your product on the shelf yet because we want you to have placement in like XYZ volume or be able to like produce at XYZ volume, but keep us in mind for the future. And here's my email, stay in touch. You were great, you know, like be successful. Like imagine that success is already yours. It's super important. So cool. Nicole, I think you are our last one.
Hi, sorry. I had myself on mute and not on video because we're we're also busy, like we're making stuff in the kitchen. But okay, so I guess I've never really had to do a pitch for my product since I'm very early on in my company and what we do. And I don't necessarily have a CPG product that I'm ready to, you know, to get an investor for, but I'm definitely interested in, you know, growing my brand and our company. And right now, I'm in a position where I'm trying to acquire like my own private kitchen to be, you know, to do more things. And I actually just been trying to apply to different grants to see if there's any possibility you know, for me to get additional funding. And one of them I came across was they wanted a pitch. And so I'm like, I don't know like really what to talk about. And like you said, I mean, I'm sure like how everybody kind of had said it, like you know your product so well, you just don't know how to like verbalize it in a way that other people would understand it. And I think for me, somebody touched upon it earlier. I think it might be Jody, where I feel like, you know, like you have something unique that you don't really know who to compare to. So it's kind of nice that you gave that example of, you know, this is what's here now, and you know, like this is what I'm trying to do. Because sometimes I think you know, or you have an idea of how unique, you know, of a product or service that you have is, but because there's nothing, I guess, out there in the market that's exactly or like in the same package that you're offering, it's a little hard to kind of find, you know, the words to say how you're unique in your own way, you know, to kind of prove to them that there's something good too that you're bringing onto the table, just because there's nothing for you to compare it to, you know.
Yeah. What is your product, if you don't mind me asking? I would love to know.
So I do Filipino Mexican cuisine. I love to really learn and weave the two cultures together and translate that into our food. I do farmers markets right now, and I'm trying to move a little, you know, push the envelope a little further and just have my, like I said, my own private kitchen, and possibly, you know, have a presence in my own community since a lot of the farmers markets that I do are on the west side. And I'd like to bring it closer to my community and expand on that.
Cool. And so are you doing like meal kits or just
I
different?
do. So our business is so it's called Masa Catalina, and it's really revolves a lot of in the word masa, meaning dough, in both cultures, in both languages. So anything dough related. So we do anything from cookies, baked goods, empanadas, tortillas, and we just recently started to dive more into sauces and salsas. And our biggest seller, I would say right now, would be tamales. And we focus a lot on organic, non-GMO, and really away from any kind of preservatives in our food.
Cool. And is your longer term goal just to have a commercial kitchen to do farmers markets or to get products into Erewhon or something like that, or to have a
Yeah,
restaurant?
so I wanted to do multiple things just to, I don't know, just thinking about like the survival of the business in the future. So
Mhm.
the little steps would be like, launching and introducing into the market and testing it out in farmers markets, and then
Mhm.
really having like a home base, I guess, in my community. And then from there possibly expand onto other satellite locations that in more of the markets that I do, and then possibly in there also CPG products like I mentioned, like salsas, and maybe even like the frozen food section and things like that.
Cool. That sounds great. It sounds like, what I would want to see in that particular instance would be kind of like, what is the genesis and timeline of that? Like in the place, like after we have traction and milestones, here's what you've done so far. And then what are you planning to do for the future? And give it a realistic timeline, but also be okay and not getting stuck on if that timeline changes. Again, this is a startup. So this is something
Yeah.
where we are creating a path where nobody has created a path before. And so who knows, like it's all probably going to change, and we just have to be okay and unattached to like all of that. And trust me, I get it. Like I'm super OCD, and like for me, I hate when timelines change. I hate when like, agreements change. I hate all of that stuff, but like it's been really good for me to be an entrepreneur because you just can't get attached to that. You're just constantly going to be, just feeling
Yeah,
like something is behind, or something is wrong. And that's just
definitely.
not the case. So yeah, that sounds great. And I'm excited to hear your pitch. So, just think
Thank
about
you.
how, like who you're talking to. Like I said, tailoring your pitch to your audience, think about who you're talking to, what you're wanting them to know, how you're wanting them to buy into your product. And then that's how you're going to do your pitch. And I look forward to hearing it later in the week.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. All right.
Well,
Thank you, everybody.
thank you guys. I'll send the recording
Thank you.
as soon as it's available, along with the link for the second meeting, which is gonna be Wednesday at 11 a.m. and the worksheet is gonna be there. So looking forward to your pitches.
Yay. Looking
Thank you,
forward.
Jennifer.
Pleasure. Talk to you all
Thank
soon.
you.
Bye, everyone.